So, Mr. Kurti, I would like to use the opportunity that you're here in New York and you are actually having a brainstorm. As many institutions here at the United States, presumably, as I understood, more of the academic institutions. So probably you are in position to think and to have a vision of Balkan region for another 20 years or 25 years. How do you see it?
I think that the biggest problem of the Balkans today is the hegemony of Serbia. Serbia created Yugoslavia to expand at the onset of the 20th century, and Serbia destroyed Yugoslavia again for the same goal, to expand. And now in power in Belgrade are best friends of Milosevic and Šešelj, namely spokesperson of Milosevic's party, Dačić, who was spokesperson for 8 years altogether, before the war, during the war, and after the war. Then his deputy is Vučić, who used to be Minister of Information of Serbia during NATO bombardments. And the President of Serbia is deputy of Šešelj, Nikolić. And these come from the same family with Karadžić, Mladić, and others. So I think that without Serbia giving up its aspirations for domination in the Western Balkans, we are not going to have peace, long-term stability and security, and likewise reconciliation. I think that Serbia wants to be a small Russia in the Balkans with its satellites, to have Republika Srpska in Bosnia, to control Serbian political parties in Montenegro, and the population there, 30% of which declare themselves Serbs because they were against independence of Montenegro, north of Kosova, and Serbian enclaves, which are trying to create a kind of small Republika Srpska inside Kosovo. And Macedonia is more or less becoming a country under Serbian protectorate. So I think that Serbia is like a small octopus. Russia is big octopus, with all former Soviet republics under its influence, with the exception of Baltic countries. And now Serbia wants to be the small octopus to present itself as key potential destabilizer, and to be listened first by Brussels, Washington, and New York in the name of stability. So I think that for a long-term prosperity of the Balkans, and for changes which are necessary in socio-economic aspect, but even more so in political and institutional one, we need to get rid of hegemony and expansionist tendencies of Serbia.
Would it be possible somehow to change the concept from that historical culprit concept, I would say, of Greater Serbia, which was a hegemon, regional hegemon, to the smarter Serbia? Whether this is possible, what kind of waves, if you would say, and if, as you mentioned here, intellectual waves or academic waves should be possible, should be necessary in order to change that? Or this is utopia, what I'm talking, or this is too naive, what I'm talking?
Well, I think that smarter Serbia is not necessarily better Serbia, because they have the same stance, they have the same goals. They change their means at the extent that circumstances changed. So I'm not very optimistic in this respect. I think that people who would represent different Serbia are a minority in Belgrade. Liberals and social democrats are very weak. It is radicals and chauvinistic nationalists who are ruling there. And unfortunately, big powers today cooperate a lot with these forces and neglect progressive forces. If you check in history, you could find some interesting truths there. I think that at the end of 19th century and beginning of 20th century, in Serbia, liberals and social democrats lost their battle with the radicals. Nikola Pašić won, and Dimitrije Tucović lost. So there is not much of legacy from Dimitrije Tucović in terms of percentage, not because there are some people who really want a different Serbia. I think that it's important.
You're saying different instead of smarter Serbia, actually.
Yes, very different. and smarter as well. But if they don't change their stances and goals and they become smarter, this is going to be bad for the neighbors of Serbia, where Albanians, Bosniaks, and Croats are at the forefront. So I think that it's important to discuss in academic levels, because a lot of things are not unique to the Balkans. They have to do with European Union, they have to do with neoliberalism, they have to do with brutal policies of privatization and imperialism and so on. So I think that it's important to have these dialogues. But again, of utter value is, at the end of the day, who's in power. So I hope that progressive forces will strengthen the opposition till one day change these people who are turning Balkans into this swamp where you do not have any kind of sustainable progress for the masses, but only wealth for the very few, for the politicians who turn into businessmen. In fact, politicians who are politicians by day because they are businessmen by night.
At the end, who may pay the biggest price of this continuous vicious circle, I would say, in terms of the same Serbia, not different, not smarter, but same Serbia for years to come? Would it be, again, Bosnia that would pay the biggest price, or even part of or Macedonia, or Montenegro, or Kosovo? How do you see it?
Well, I think neighbors of Serbia are endangered, and who will suffer more and when and how, I cannot predict this. But I think that Serbia is trying with new policies to achieve old aims, and we should be very much aware of this. Because somehow with the crisis in EU, nation state is back. And this nation state,
which is old concept.
Yes,
which is from the very beginning.
Is going to be used by political elites, and especially by current governments. You know very well that 3 or 4 years ago, James Steinberg and Carl Bildt wrote a letter to people of Bosnia, telling them that you cannot join EU because you're not sovereign. But it's not fair, Kosovo and Bosnia not to be sovereign, and Serbia to get visa liberalization, all the doors to the new government there, which is actually the old government of Milosevic, to be received at the European capitals.
So you're talking about recycling of the whole history?
Definitely. I think that the recycling will not be pure repetition, but again, a lot of things will be repeated. I think it's not fair that Serbian police, army, and paramilitary forces killed around 150,000 non-Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, and Albanians. And if one Serbian policeman, paramilitary, or soldier killed 5 people, we'll leave for time alone all the devastations and tortures and raping and so on. This means that in Serbia you have 30,000 serial murderers walking free. They got visa liberalization, they are in state apparatus, and the number of those who are in prison because of all these crimes is a 2-digit number. So I think that Serbia never faced it past, and nothing which would be, I don't know, like a bit similar to denazification didn't happen to Serbia. And this is crucial for different Balkans. I think that for another Balkans, we need another Serbia.
Thank you very much. But can we, and I think we should, end in some optimistic thinking, since you have optimistic programs for development of Kosovo?
Of course, I think that the model of developmental state is an optimistic model, because it relies on the self-confidence of people to produce. Services and trades and finances are important branches of economy, but production is even more so. We have to start and produce. Agricultural, mines and minerals, energy, light industry, heavy industry, and so on, and turn citizens into workers. Perhaps in the previous century, we were workers without being citizens. Now we are citizens without being workers. So we need to be both citizens and workers.
Thank you very much indeed.